I am going to give you, as a listener, the most valuable thing that I could give you. Not money, not my firstborn, not my kidney, but my time. The best thing you could do is give somebody a damn good show.
Here we go. Podcast time, everybody. Mik Tek Studios.
Podcast episode number 26, Intro to Starting Your Podcast. All right, and we're back to the next episode of the Mik Tek Studios Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. This is Michael Midnight, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which we're kind of already doing. It's podcasting. So I think there's 700,000 podcasts in the world right now. Can you think about that? Do you know what you would say to 700,000 people? Maybe you'd ask them if they had $5. Retire. I don't know. Anyway, that's a lot of content. And it's definitely not enough time to listen to all of it. What I will say is not all of it is good. In the stuff I've heard recently, which has been cringe-worthy. I hope that after this episode, I get some good recommendations and some polished stuff. But what we're going to talk about today, I think my journey from podcasting and just what I've seen over the last, I want to say 2 or so years of my journey as a podcaster, as a professional storyteller, and the ups and downs of what I've experienced and what has gotten to be where I am right now to have my content as well produced as it is, the type of crafting and storytelling that I do entail, and just overall sharing some insight that I believe would be beneficial to the parties that do check this out and tune this in. So first and foremost, how did I start out podcasting? So that's a very, very good question. So I've always loved story. Story is something that I find to be super just impactful. It's something that is incredibly memorable. I actually spoke about this with one of my friends and also a host of the All Things Risk podcast, Ben Catania. He says, I remember explaining with him because he asked me why marketing, why podcasting, why the creative outlet, and it goes back to any of the animated characters that you used to see back in the day. So my favorite to reference is The Lion King, the original one, not this new one we're not going to talk about it, but the original one. I want you to, if you are listening to this, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to think for a second of just only being able to be responsive to what you hear acoustically, what it is that I am speaking to you. Now, it's kind of easy to do. This isn't really a visually laced podcast episode, and this isn't really a series that I have too much visuals, and this episode would be no different. But in the scene, and I'm sure many folks have seen it by now, and if not, too late, spoiler alert, but we have the scene set where there's a stampede going through the valley, and Simba is caught on a cliff. And Mufasa, who's his father, is doing what he can to get him away from the stampede, right? So that he doesn't get trampled. But in the midst of doing that, he gets caught up in the herd, and Simba is freaking out, and the music is blaring, and Scar is sitting watching all of this as he has planned it out to the T for something like this to happen. As Mufasa is desperately trying to get up, he's clawing his way up. Scar, brother! And Scar, with the smirk, with the smile, with the evil grin in his face, stabs his brother's paws, and he looks right in his eyes in his biggest debut of pain that he has, and he says, "Long live the king." And he releases his brother in a free fall. We don't actually see him hit the ground because there was such a stampede that we can't. And then it's silent. We hear nothing. Simba is trying to figure out why his father won't get up. His father won't get up because he's no longer with us. Now that didn't happen. That is people on a microphone just like this. It is swabs of paint and animation and CG. This actually never happened. But how many of us can remember that specific scene like it was yesterday? It is something we can recall. You don't even know cousins' names. You don't even know who was the 23rd or 24th president. But you remember that. You remember Yoda. You know who Sonic the Hedgehog is. You know who Pikachu is. Everybody knows who Pikachu is. See the difference? That is amazing to be able to do that with something that isn't real, that doesn't exist. So I've loved story. And I want to say probably almost 4 years ago now. Wow, it's been a while. 4 years ago, I had a boss that I was working with who was a professional podcaster. And he was just so into just the microphones, and you gotta have this microphone, it's gotta be set up, you gotta have the phantom power, you gotta have this, you gotta have that, here's your Roadster. He was just so into it. I'm like, oh my God, it's a microphone. A microphone's a microphone. You just, it's good enough, right? That was my mentality too. Now I wanted good quality sound, right? But I wanted to be able to do the best that I could with what I had. And some of these microphones and setups, they're expensive. So I was just able to see behind the scenes every day him working on this and producing it pretty quickly. Now, the difference with him and I is I polish my content a lot more and I don't have 4 or 5 editors working for me. So that's a little bit different, but I digress. It was something that I felt was a different medium. It's not a movie. It's not a book. It's not a video game. It is something that is a combination of all of those things, and yet something different in its entirety. It's very authentic. Some of them can be very boring. This just wasn't. It was something you could express, and almost like the old radio shows that people would tune into, but now you could do it from the comfort of your pocket on different podcast apps, on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Podcast Addict or whatever. I just found the freedom of being able to not only discuss topics that I have dealt with within the past 15 years of my personal and professional life experience that I think others would find fruitful and beneficial, but also just humorous. My voice, my content was missing. This was the ability, the ticket to be able to do this. And again, there are 700,000 shows as of this time. 700,000 voices being heard. Not all of them are good. And that was the difficulty that I found. I wanted to make sure that the shows that I produced, the content, the episodes that I produced were good. They were worth listening to. They were worth your 10, 15, 25, 40 minutes, like this podcast episode is probably going to be. So I apologize now, but it's a good topic and it's something I feel very personally about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a lot of really good questions that I have either asked myself, I've seen asked 100 times, or I think that it's worth hearing, it's worth covering, and it's worth answering. But the first thing I am going to say, I'm going to start and I'm going to end with just start. Today can be the day that you start to tell your story. Just make sure it's a good story, make sure it's an authentic story, and make sure it's something that either you're proud of or it's going to make you money. Make sure that you know that ahead of time. If you're getting into the podcasting world and you think, I'm going to make all this money, you're going to fail. Unless you know the answer, you've paying somebody to help you navigate through, like a manager to navigate through to the successful point at the end, then Godspeed to you, but I haven't found that person yet. If so, just get them in contact with me, please. I could use their help. So the first question of interest really is what I see all the time. What microphone do I use? Now, I personally do not remember what microphone I'm using as of this time because honestly, it's not really that important. I see a lot of people starting out that go for the Blue Yeti because that is the one that grabs the most marketing. Therefore, it's on the minds and on the tip of the tongue from the get-go. What I'm going to tell you is that you do not need a $100 microphone to be able to start out. Just start. Start by explaining something at work. Give a presentation. Record yourself talking about a particular topic that you enjoy. You can start on your phone. It's not that difficult. But make sure it's something that folks want to listen to and make sure that it doesn't have really annoying frequencies that you need to filter out in your editing process. And we're going to cover that in a couple of questions from now. But honestly, your microphone, when you're just starting out, it's not that serious. If you want to couple up with somebody who has been doing podcasting, chances are they may have an extra. The USB-based microphones, they're not going to give you as amazing of quality as the studio level non-USB ones will. I'm going to tell you a little secret. I don't use those studio ones. I use USB. Shh. Yes, you can get this level of quality if you know what you're doing on a USB microphone. It's not that serious. Okay, so as I get bigger, I will go and get the most beautiful, wonderful, expensive microphones with my name on it and the gold, and that's great. I don't need it. Neither do you. Just start. Once you have the sponsorships, once you have some sort of revenue stream coming in that you can buy and upgrade, that's when it matters. Just get a good show going, have it sound half decent, just go from there. All right, so another good question. Where do I record, right? So people are thinking, all right, I got to have this massive studio. I got to get this crazy soundproof booth. I got to get the mixers that I see in the movies, and I got to get Wyclef Jean. He's got to be mixing for me, and I got to have this set. You don't. You need none of those things. You literally could do this in your bedroom. You could do this in somebody's closet. Literally, you can take your phone, you can bring it into a closet, you can have this conversation, you can read from your tablet, you can read from your phone, as long as it's something that's going to capture somebody's interest. So when you're doing this, you have to realize you are a performer, you are an entertainer, you are a comedian, you are a reporter, you are a vocalist, you're a singer, you are a voiceover talent. Your energy has to emanate through the microphone. I am going to give you, as a listener, the most valuable thing that I could give you. Not money, not my firstborn, not my kidney, but my time. The best thing you could do is give somebody a damn good show. That is your focus point. Every time that you're recording an episode, somebody else is listening to this. Do you want them to listen to it? If so, be a good showman or showwoman. So when you're recording, if you're in a house with a lot of kids, or if you're in an apartment building with a lot of noise, try to find a time that you're not annoying your neighbors, or if there's a space at work that you can utilize after work. There are many DIY setups you can find online. I might actually set up one and show just for other podcast listeners. You can build. You don't need expensive acoustic foam. It's nice. It's not needed. You can build your own DIY acoustic dampeners for $20 or less if you know how to do things right. You can utilize, again, clothing, towels, things of that nature. I have personally found a duvet cover that I got from a thrift store for, I believe, $10 or $15. When I wrap myself around it and I really want to do some really heavy duty vocal work, oh, you can't hear a thing with that. It is hot, but hey, listen, that's part of the game, man. You got to sweat a little bit to make it happen, you know? But ironically enough, if you do find places that work out for you, you can rent out. If you really do need a professional space, you can go to your local library. Believe it or not, there's spaces coming in Office Depot. They're getting into the podcast studio game for what I've been reading online. You do have studio space that you can rent by the hour. I'm sure there's also these open office things that you can talk to one of the owners or co-owners and see if you can utilize that after hours. Just try to find something that's quiet. So another thing, all right, so you're getting in the thicket of things. You got a couple of episodes in your belt, and you're all right, okay, I want to get a co-host on, or I want to have some guests. How do I get guests on, right? What do I use to record? What happens, right? Okay. So this is going to be a heavily, I guess, opinionated statement. So my go-to has always been Zoom, ZOOM.us. Now, I can hear some professional podcasters cringing and saying, oh, but the audio quality, it's terrible. It's so tinny, and I've been so... Look, I mean, that's been their experience. I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect, but guess what? Zoom is free. Zoom is available on the majority of mediums that you need to be on. Mac, Windows, Android, iPhone, whatever it is, there's an app. You can call in. I don't know what the limitation is now, but if it really does work and it's worth your while, then hey, you pay for the professional license. It's good for a while. I actually utilized it for developers when we're having development sessions, and we can share screens. I can take a look at their dev instances and see what they're working on and see how it works compared to what we agreed on. Other creative collaborators, we share screens, we share content, we can take a look, and it also records at the same time individually. So if you have 4 people that are talking at the same time, when that recording is done, you have 5, but you have 4 separate recordings for each person that is a part of that conference, right? So as a podcaster, that's amazing, because maybe somebody got a call, they cleared their throat, right? While you're talking, you could go in on their line, on their audio, and just delete that out. It's amazing. You can also go and you can use Skype, you can use Google Voice, there's Zencaster, there's Ringer, there's other things that are available. I just say, look, try one. If it doesn't work for you, research, but try. Just pick one, stick with it, figure it out, see what you like, see what you don't like, see what others say when they listen to it, see what the experience is for your guest. Is it easy for them to log in? Is it easy for them to express their content? Are you picking up everything on the microphone as they're talking? Just get a feel. What I will say is try to utilize a wired connection as much as possible. Wireless cuts out. People think they're talking. You get all this glitchy noise, all this glitchy voice. For whatever reason, you can't edit it out. Now your listeners have to listen to that for the rest of their lives. That sucks. It's terrible. Bad. Shame on you. All right. So really, we got some episodes in. We got some guests. Good topic. Crap. What do I talk about? I'm not sure, right? Okay. This comes down to your personal experience. Now you're into the thick of things. You're creating content. You're going to have to think of things to talk about every day. I recommend doing some research on your niche. Go on Quora, go on Facebook, go to Facebook groups, go on LinkedIn, sit in on conversations with your coworkers. Don't sit there and peek. Don't be creepy. Don't look at what they're eating for lunch and eavesdrop, but just get a general census of what is going on in your industry or your industry of instance instance. See, talking with developers will do that to you with your area of interest and see what it is that speaks to you. What is it that gets the most talked about answers? So this intro and how to start out podcasting, this is something I've asked. This is something hundreds and thousands of people ask on a daily basis. See what their answers are. Create content like this to help others. And not only that, you're creating content yourself on a platform that you can help position yourself for SEO purposes. So it's a win-win situation. You're helping people out based on your experience. You're positioning great content to be seen by the masses, and it's got your name on it. So talk about things that give you the ability to share your experiences in the best light possible, and also give the people tuning in a great takeaway, something that's maybe funny, interesting, inspiring, or educational, or my favorite is all the above. All right, so you got all this content going, right? You're doing all this recording, you're a happening guy or gal. Now, how do I edit all this crap, right? Oh, gee, I just had this great conversation with somebody who's got a new book coming out, and well, they talked their brains out for an hour and a half. How do I whittle that down to a 45-minute episode people are actually going to tune into, right? All right, so I did a post. So quite a few of you may be in these types of groups already, but I am in a podcasting editors club on Facebook, and I did a poll. I wanted to see, just out of curiosity of the hundreds of users, I believe there might even be 1,000 or so users, what was their editing tool of choice and why. So I'm going to give you probably the top 6 or 7, but in a overwhelming majority, folks are using Adobe Audition. That is a paid app from Adobe, but that is the industry standard for the majority of folks that I have seen, not only for positions that are offering for audio engineers and things of that nature, but that is what they're using. That is the top one. Right behind it is a program called Reaper. You also have Pro Tools. If you're trying to do it on a shoestring budget or for cheap, you're just starting out, Audacity is great. Doesn't cost anything. It is available on Mac and PC. Heidenberg Journalist Pro came in 5th with 9 votes. So there was actually a handful of people that used that. And then we had a couple of industry standard folks. Some use Pro Tools, like I said before, but you had Logic Pro X and Ableton. Okay, so you have Adobe Audition, Reaper, Pro Tools, Audacity, Hindenburg Journalist Pro, Logic Pro X, and Ableton. I personally, as of this time right now, I edit most of my stuff in Final Cut Pro. I know it's overkill. I came from a program called Camtasia, which is great for screencasting to kind of show folks what you're doing on the screen for UI work when there are some glitches in our system, or you want to review a document with somebody and you want to make it as compact as possible. I can do that in Camtasia. It was not worth it editing podcast in Camtasia. I heard every click. The audio it just didn't work. I can smooth things out in Final Cut Pro. I know I can hear people cringing. I'm sorry. It's what I know. I went from really crappy to over polish. I am making my way actually into RX, or probably Adobe Audition really seems to be the industry standard. So I might have to bite the bullet and learn that, but there's a learning curve for all of these things. So anyway, those are some ideas as to what you could take a look and use. And I'll probably have links of each in the show notes as well, so folks can take a look and see what's going on. All right, so you got all this great content, you're editing it. Now, where do you host? Where do you host your content? What do you do? Again, dealer's choice. So in my personal experience, I took advantage of SoundCloud, and I know that's the bad thing, and people go, it's not what it's for. It's not podcasting. You can't get your analytics and your metrics. I know. I get it. But I started out with nothing. My focus was you have, I believe it's an hour and a half or 2 hours of free hosting that you could use for your episodes. So I utilized that into roughly 10-minute episodes when I first started out the Mik Tek Studios podcast. I said, all right, this is what I have. At this time, I'm going to go out. I'm going to network. I'm going to talk to as many people as possible. I'm going to get them to listen to my show, to like my show, to talk about my show, to do something with my show, aside from peeing on it. I don't want them peeing on it. And I was successful. Within 90 days, we did a mini-series, which most of you have actually seen, called Recruitamentary. That was a mini-series on the Mik Tek Studios podcast. That ended up becoming paid sponsorship. So within 90 days, not paying anything, having all of the resources that I already had, computer, what have you, okay, and the audio sounded not that great. If you listen to the first couple of episodes, they are bad. I'm embarrassed, but they're out. They impressed people enough to give some sort of sponsorship, even if it was $500 or less. It's something. It gets you started, right? But for those of you who are looking to do more content, maybe it doesn't work out as successfully, Anchor.fm is another good recommendation for cheap. Podsprout, I believe, is another one. There's a few others, again, depending on what it is that you're looking to host. What I also recommend is keeping an eye on a website called appsumo, appsumo.com. Sometimes they will have hosting, or they have a bunch of different apps and services and things that are starting out that are looking for exposure. And you could be a newer user and you can buy in a lifetime license. They just recently, about 2 weeks ago, had a really, really good deal on some podcast hosting. I just didn't see it until it was too late. I hate it. It sucks. I will try to see maybe about reaching out to them to talk a little bit more about their timeline and workflow. Maybe they might offer something to the listeners of the podcast. We get enough likes or we get enough shout outs from that. Maybe it's something I could take a look at. I'd love to do that. Take a look, see what works for you, but try not to spend too much money at first. It is difficult though to swap and do a RSS feed redirect if you do change your mind. So just keep in mind there's probably going to be a little bit of legwork. I started from SoundCloud. It was the cheapest that I saw at the time. I utilize it because if I want to swap out a episode, let's say for example I find an error, or I want to throw in an ad, or I want to redo the audio, or if for whatever reason there's a copyright infringement that I need to edit or adjust, I can replace the original audio file. It gets displaced out to all the major platforms that my podcast has been deployed on. So that wins for me. It's easy to do that. All right, so moving on to another really good question. Should I have a website for my podcast? The answer is yes. Yes. Here's why. Even if nobody is listening to your podcast on your website, you are doing it for domain authority. Let's say for the Mik Tek Studios Podcast, you put in Mik Tek Studios Podcast, everything pops up Mik Tek Studios Podcast. If you type in Mik Tek Studios, it may show up as the microphones that have nothing to do with Mik Tek Studios. Yes, I know that there are two people using the name. I have used it since I was a child. That was my father's nickname to me. Ha 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 ha. Unfortunately, somebody started utilizing it, and from what the sounds of it is, they make amazing microphones. I have no interest whatsoever in selling microphones. I do, however, have interest in entertainment, creating content, graphic design, and any other forms of business support and development that I can do as a brand. That is what MikTek.tv is about. So in my instance, I constantly have to fight to make sure that Mik Tek Studios is shown for the brand that it is, for the content that it is. So if you're doing something about Bob's Hot Dogs, let's say for example, and somebody else is doing hot dogs in your area, or they're well known for doing hot dogs, you want to make sure that bobshotdogs.com shows up with your name and your content attached to it. When somebody does a Google search, you want to show up. So not only for domain authority, but for SEO purposes as well. You want to give them a good show. You want to make sure it's easy to read the content about the show, what your podcast, what your episodes are about, maybe some guests, all good for backlinks. Maybe somebody does a guest spot on your show, you do it on theirs, you have some backlinks, maybe they write a guest blog post. Now you have some synergy, you have some juice going with your SEO. Beautiful. All right, so you got a couple episodes in, you feeling real good. All right, I made my 2 podcast episodes. All right, what do I do now? I want to make some money. How do I get some sponsors, right? Again, if you're going into that and you've made less than maybe 15 episodes, don't even bother. You're not going to get content sponsorship, okay? Just being honest with you, I'm just being realistic. If you're going into this trying to make money after a month of working, you're going to be disappointed. There are exceptions to the rule, but that is not the case. But if you have a real polished perspective, you know what you're talking about, you know what you want, you have made content that nobody else in your industry is doing, everybody's listening to it, seek out those of interest in your areas. Utilize LinkedIn. Send out some emails. Hey, I'd love for you to take a look, take a listen. Maybe have somebody as a guest on your podcast. That's what happened with me. Hey, you know what? I love to be a part of what you're doing, was what the email said. Who do I send this to? I want to send the owner this. How can they get a hold of you? Here's my contact information. We want to be a part of this. We want to have our name on there somewhere. See, it gets them excited. You want to create exciting, engaging content and then say, hey, I can do this for you. I would love to continue doing this. I would love your blessing, and create something that is a win-win for that sponsor. If it's something that you can read an ad online, great. If it's something where you can have on your website, that whatever it is that you can work out, try to work on something, again, that is worthwhile for your listeners. Yes, you need to pay the bills. I have turned away many design opportunities over the years because they are a plenty. I had somebody call me one time and try to really discuss with me that sex trafficking is no different than guys just, going on dates with girls. And I laughed at the guy and I hung up in his face. That's not what it is. And that is not what your podcast, everything is not about the money. Create great content, money follows. Your content will be up there a year later. You can reference people, dozens of different episodes that you've done. All right, so now, and this is something that I've heard constantly, I'm good at talking. People will say, hey, that means I'm great to do a podcast. I like to talk. No. It does not mean that you are going to be an amazing podcaster. It just means that you like to talk. Now, what I would say for you to do is record yourself talking. And it's difficult to play it back and listen, but you're a performer. You are an entertainer. If you can't make it to Broadway, you have to bring Broadway to you, right? Are you engaging? Is it something that's going to capture somebody's interest? You're in 25, 35 minutes into this episode, however long it's going to go. Are you still listening? Are you still taking notes? Is this something that's going to be worthwhile and change your life? Are you going to put into practice what you get from this episode? Yes? Then success. You can talk for 2 hours if people are going to listen, if people are going to have that clear takeaway. But if you're just sitting in church and you're hearing a pastor preach and you're looking at your watch, once people start looking at their watch, then you realize you've talked too much. You're losing people's interest. So really dig down deep. Make sure you know what you want to talk about. Make sure you know what the episode is about. And again, make sure that you know that this is something that you want to listen to, that you're proud of, that you could show to somebody and say, hey, listen, this is the newest episode that I did. Do you mind listening to it? Creating small audiograms of your episode, 1-minute clips. Just give people a sample of an idea of what to expect of your content. It's a lot to ask people 25 minutes of their time. It's a lot to ask for 10 minutes, even 15. You can get them in 60 seconds. You've probably listened to this episode in a 60-second snippet, and now you've tuned in to see what else it's about. But we have a whole great back catalog of marketing and logo design and SEO and statements of work. By all means, check them out. Let me know what you think. Comment below if you have any other really good podcasting questions. If there's things that I've missed that really you'd like to have an answer to, your thought process, and trust me, there are dozens of other questions, but if you're listening on YouTube, comment on them below. Just let me know what it is I can ask, or the community watching these types of episodes online, or if they're listening on different mediums, we'll be able to answer for you or with you, or I'll include it in the next episode if that's the case. But if so, shoot an email out to podcast@miktek.tv. You can also go online on the miktek.tv contact us page, and you could fire off a question there. If you don't feel like jotting down an email, that works. miktek.tv as in television. Feel free to like, subscribe, share the content. Let me know your thoughts. What's been your approach, your journey as a podcaster? If you're just starting out, what are your fears? What are your desires? What are you looking to get out of it? Are you here for money? Are you here to make it a better place? Are you here just to hear yourself talk? I hope not. You're going to get tired of hearing your voice. Trust me. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate every single one of you that took the time to listen to this. This is definitely going to be a much longer than usual episode. By all means, share with those who you think might find it of interest. This has been another episode of the Mik Tek Studios Podcast. This is Michael Midnight signing off. You guys have yourself a good night. Take care now.
The Mik Tek Studios Podcast, your source for design, entertainment, marketing conversations, and content. Amazing guests, tips, humor, and stories available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and your podcast app of choice. This has been a Mik Tek Studios production.